Dave,
Hey,
I feel
Matt.
like Dave, I feel like we should be at a conference right now. Isn't there a conference that was going on?
Airports at Work was supposed to be going on right now. I was excited about being there, man.
I want to tell you that I have my dogs trained to make everything awkward by barking in at least a minute or two.
Okay.
So that's that's what I've been spending my quarantine time on, is training my dogs to bark just to make everything awkward for everybody's video chats. So don't even
Well,
worry about
delivery guys make that job easy for me. They've trained my dogs.
it.
They go
And
nuts.
we didn't have to get haircuts for this. Um,
No,
I've been good
I,
on the quarantine haircut.
I've been doing my own hair for like 10 years, and we're kind of in a unique club where being quarantined has not affected our hairstyles in any way.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. I
Yeah.
even it was getting so crazy on the haircuts that I just shaved. I I actually saw my chin for the first time.
Nicely
So
done.
yeah, not
It
bad
looks
at
good.
all. So, dude, that's like what is that? Like a Steiner of
It's iced tea. There's no alcohol. Iced tea.
is that like South Carolina Oktoberfest?
That's exactly what it is.
If
I
you're
carry,
listening to this, folks, Dave literally has like a 64-ounce beer steiner of sweet tea that is
it,
incredible.
it's unsweet. It's unsweet.
Or
Watching-
unsweet.
I'm watching my
Unsweet.
girlish figure.
Well, I guess we will get started. My name is Matt Powell, so thanks everybody that's logged in and watching this. I'm the Transportation Market Manager for Convergent Technologies. And so, Dave, you want to go ahead and talk about yourself and your unsweet tea real quick?
Yeah. Uh, I'm David Peeples. I'm the CEO of Intellisoft, and I've been doing identity management projects since like 1996. I worked for a company called Goddard Technology out of college, and I did projects in healthcare, higher ed, military, energy, all sorts of stuff. But airports was one of the things we started playing around with back when the FAA was, responsible for that stuff. And all those markets were cool, but airports were definitely the most interesting. And prior to the founding of Intellisoft, I did work with Dulles National, SeaTac, Atlanta, and did some really cool things with them. But the company Goddard wasn't majorly focused on airports, and I basically took one of our developers and started Intellisoft. And since then, we've deployed projects, at airports all over the country, and I've really enjoyed that, and learned a lot, and have really over the past 15 years, and really wish we were all in Seattle right now, hanging out with each other.
Yeah. Two questions. Is your phone on silent?
No, no. I should put my phone on silent. I
Yeah.
apologize.
Um, okay, there we go. Yeah. It kept people were telling you how good you looked on camera through text message, and nobody's notifying me. It's ridiculous here. So no, it's all good. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that everyone gets something out of this. We have people that are logged in and watching this that they're looking at getting a new system and they're looking pretty hard at it, or they already have an existing system, or they already, they're trying to work with their system. They're looking at RFPs. There's a lot of things. So I want to tell everybody the high points here so you know what we're going to cover with this conversation. We're going to talk about why the need of identity management. Yes, I'm reading this, so it sounds scripted, but the people are like, God, Matt sounds like a robot right now. So why the need? Then we're going to talk about the failure themes. And these are things, what Dave and I, when we originally came up with this, is Dave and I talk on the phone a pretty good bit every week about all kinds of different stuff. And a lot of times what we talk about, like we're doing a project at Tampa right now, we've got other projects that we're working on, is why does identity management fail? So we're going to talk about first, how are the projects kind of set up for failure from the very start. So we're going to talk about RFPs and the purchasing process. Then we're going to talk about project management and talk about why do these projects seem to fail. You've gotten through the RFP, you've gotten through purchasing, you've gotten it, now it's out there deploying, and there seems to be a lot of failure. So we're going to talk about that. Then usage and support is what we're going to talk about. Why does long-term usage seem difficult? Why do these systems get a bad reputation unless they're Intellisoft? And what can we do about that? And lastly, we'll do a Q&A. So if you have questions and you're logged in, make sure that you type them in, and we will make sure that we get to them at the very end. So first, I want to talk about why the need. And this is something that you and I talk about a good bit, but you know more about identity management than I will probably ever learn. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none when it comes to this type of stuff. I know a whole lot about a whole lot of things, but not as much as you. You're the expert here. So why do airports want an identity management to begin with?
Well, one of the big ones is regulations. So between TSA, FAA, and CBP, there are a lot of regulations that airports have to keep up with when issuing ID media, and they change. And so it's really important that they keep up with those things. Otherwise, they can get fined. Major fines associated with that. A lot of times ID offices are inefficient. They have workflow processes that lead to long lines in the ID office that cause customer service problems and employee frustration. They have redundant systems that they need to enter data into, whether it's the ID system, their physical access control system, their training system, background systems. There's all sorts of problems where they're having to enter in the same information, and that can cause all sorts of issues with data entry issues. But in addition to that, they don't have one single source of information for reporting. And then, ineffective stakeholder communication. When are badges going to expire? When are, what type of TSA reports do they have to provide to the TSA or to the FAA? How are they communicating properly with their airlines and their air carriers, their tenants, their law enforcement officers with stop lists? And then, a lack of accountability, visibility, and tracking in who's doing what and when they're doing it. I think automation is probably the big key right now, because if you look at, when I talk about complex and ever-changing, regulatory compliance issues, we've got, a ton of alternative measures or drafts that have been coming out. A new one, just came out recently from the TSA, and we're talking about trying to limit the number of people in the ID office, and automation can help that. We want to prevent paper from being brought in. A lot of these systems are paper-based, and so we're trying to do everything that we can to minimize the strain on airports in compliance and in efficiency, to make sure that they're prepared to meet the challenges that exist in this market.
So, I remember when I first started learning about this years ago, and I didn't know you at that point, but I would hear about these things, and I think a lot of people that are in these situations, it's like they know something's wrong. It's like they have a cough, but they're not sure if they have the flu or a cold or COVID or whatever it is. That is the type of situation where people kind of feel like every time you drink out of that thing, it is cracking me up. That is the biggest sweet or the unsweet tea glass I've ever seen. But people know that something's wrong. They know these things are there, but I think, over time people have heard about identity management. What are we going to do with identity management? And it's starting to, move forward. But, that's a lot of important needs just to have a system that fails. Because we've got a software that can fix some of these challenges through the software, but if it's just going to fail, then what's the point of having it? And I think, we all hear about people out there saying, maybe I should go back to manual. I can tell you, Convergint, we have one airport where we turn the identity management off after 5 years. And we went back to a kind of a hybrid model between the DAC and the access control system, and wrote some custom scripts in there. And so, it is a challenge, but it kind of starts at the very beginning of, it's kind of, you're just setting the whole thing up to fail at the very beginning. So, we can get into more details on each of these things as we continue the conversation. But, what are some of the major causes that you see at the very beginning? I guess, before you ever get the system, before you ever go live, what are some of the major causes that create these failures?
Yeah, we definitely have seen some bad RFPs in the past. We've seen some bad purchasing processes that have been adopted by airports. Bad proposals. We've written bad proposals, and they're sometimes difficult to compare to each other. I think one of the big ones is too many customizations. Way too many customizations that turn these projects from an off-the-shelf project to a custom software project deployment. Bad project management on both ends, and that counts. That's us too. Sometimes, not anymore. We're getting significantly better, but we've definitely managed projects badly in the past. Overcommitted vendors who basically say, hey, they see a spec and they jump in and say, yeah, we're going to do all those things. And then under-engaged airport stakeholders. They don't care about the system. Maybe they don't even want the system. Maybe they weren't consulted about the system before it was purchased. There's a massive difference between an airport that really wants this and one it's kind of being forced down their throats. So those are kind of the big issues.
And let's dig into those a little bit. I know I tell our airports that identity management isn't just a software change, it's a cultural change.
Sure.
That you're changing and if you don't get everything kind of lined up at the very beginning, then you kind of have to address them as you go. When we talk about failure themes in the RFP process and the purchasing, and they're kind of set up to fail from the very beginning, and how can we fix some of those things? You're kind of famous in the industry, and it drove me crazy for years trying to work with you for Convergint, working with Intellisoft, that bid more than you bid, which is just mind-blowing to a lot of people out there. Why is that? Why do you bid more than you bid?
Oh, well, I got excited. You said I was famous in the industry for a minute.
You're famous.
I'm famous for not bidding projects.
Yeah. After this, you're going to be famous for that tea glass. You're going to have to carry it everywhere like a chalice.
Right. So there's not really much mystery. We sometimes and normally I always send letters or call the airports and let them know. Sometimes we just don't have the resources to work on a project, to actually do the work. We've grown at a rate of about 30% per year over the past 5 years, but sometimes our dance card just gets full, and other times the RFP just scares us, and so we don't bid it because of the RFP.
Well, when I say famous, you're known for not for.
I am infamous.
Infamous for, you're infamous for no bidding more than you bid, but you're famous for turning your airports on time.
Yeah.
You turn them on time and you have happy customers. So there is definitely a balance there that you figured out between, saying yes to the business that you want and then doing the business that you want really well. When you said that you get scared of an RFP, sometimes they just scare you off. What's the difference in your mind? And this is something that you and I talk about a pretty good bit when we talk to our existing airports. What's the difference between a good RFP and a bad RFP? Is it length? Is it, a 270-point checklist? What do you think it is?
Yeah, we definitely have a risk evaluation process that we go through on every RFP we're considering, and we need to figure out, are we going to meet the specs off the shelf, or is there custom development involved in the project? Have we integrated with all the different systems out there? Sometimes a legacy physical access control system can scare us away if we haven't integrated with it before, or sometimes there isn't even support available for that access control system anymore because it's been end of life for 10 years. Are the contract terms reasonable? Do we have a partner like a Convergint with a local presence there at the airport? Because that's essential to us as well. Is the leadership of the airport good? Have I seen them, speak at conferences before and know that they're really going after it and trying to do good things at their airport? And you mentioned length. Length of an RFP is a big deal for us because the amount of time it takes us to do a risk analysis on a 100-page RFP is, it's a lot of time. But if it's a 500-page RFP, wow, now we're getting into a point where we're really concerned.
I think especially when it comes to software and so forth, that a lot of the industry doesn't understand that for the manufacturers and the integrators, when you have there's a lot of stuff that we have to go through to reply to an RFP between legal people looking at it, making sure that it's not filled with grammar. I mean, every little thing that you can think of. So when you have, a 500-page RFP and you give everybody 3 weeks to reply to it, it can be a challenge. But, on the other hand, isn't it good that airports are spending a lot of time developing their RFPs? I mean, when you see the RFP, it seems to reflect what the airport wants.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that it's something that shouldn't be taken lightly, and they do need to spend time on it for sure. But over a period of time with airports, they're in certain positions, there can be a lot of turnover, and the process may begin with one set of stakeholders, and by the time that RFP hits the street, they're a completely new set of stakeholders. And 500 pages, who has the time to read that much? Even the airport themselves, how many people at the airport know what's in those 500 pages? And the big problem is they start incorporating unicorns, and that is, the product doesn't really exist that they're looking for. And so they'll take the best pieces of every system that's out there and say, hey, let's put that's what we want. We want that. Plus we have this other list of wish and dreams because they see, man, this is amazing automation. What would be really cool is if it does this. And sometimes those things, the features and requirements get very prescriptive and talk about what the GUI should actually look like. There should be a drop-down menu right here, and there should be a checkbox right here, and this screen should be this color under these conditions. And it's, some of them are neat ideas, but, it just gets to be, you're basically now asking for a custom software project instead of a commercial off-the-shelf product. And what's really funny about this is the vast majority of these specs, actually, I don't know that I've seen one yet that doesn't say they want commercial off the shelf, but then proceed to add 100 things in there that no off the shelf product does from anybody in our industry.
Well, they always say if you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. And I always tell our airports, like, look, we've done this 10 times. You're doing this once.
Right.
So, when we tell you this, listen to us. We've done this enough times that we know where the challenges lie. The more you try to customize this, the more you try to do this with the software instead of, this is a good chance to hit the reset button. We all know that there's a lot of things in common between these airports. Yeah,
sure. What unites us is far greater than what divides us. So they definitely have, they have to deal with all the same regulations, and they need the same type of reporting and the same type of communication. But there are some pretty vast differences that can be addressed with configuration. So we're not actually having to customize the software with code. We can, most IDMSs can support those changes just through configurations. So, I'm pretty sure.
I think the other thing is you have to define. You have to start with what success is defined as first, instead of a wish list, of here's all the things that I wish the software could do. You have to kind of start with, okay, what is the software actually going to do once it's here?
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
kind of define that and work your way backwards to what you want it to be able to do, and work with your consultant, your integrator, your manufacturer on that.
Well, that's one of the part of, every time we do a kickoff on one of these projects now, 2 years ago, I made the best decision of my career and hired a project manager who had run massive teams, managing, billions of dollars of projects. And, one of the things that he always does in kickoffs is he hands everybody a pad of a legal, or not legal pad, Post-it notes, and a magic marker, and he says, I want you to write down what will make this project a success, what you believe is going to make it a success. And we'll go around the room and everybody will put those up on the board, and we document those things in our project charter, so we know what each of those stakeholders in the room wants to see as far as what they believe is going to make this system a success. And we can't really succeed unless we know what success looks like. So they may have to do with, we want it to enforce all of our business rules. We want to make sure that our processes are streamlined. Whatever those things are, we want to make sure that we are getting those things done for them in the end of the project. So understanding what success looks like is incredibly important.
And it looks like, let me take a look here, because I'm getting a notification on the Q&A. Okay, so we have a question from Jerry. From your experience, how important are upfront success factors for an implementation?
This is Jerry Schwinghammer.
Yes, Jerry says I wouldn't let a project launch without him. Wondering how useful that was.
Yeah, Jerry used to be at Charlotte Airport.
Okay.
He was the head IT guy there when we kicked off our project. So he's been in a room where this has happened, where we've handed out the Post-it notes.
So
what's the question?
He said, from your experience, how important are upfront success factors for an implementation? I guess like kind of setting the stage for the rest of it.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got to know, because those need to be the goals that we focus on throughout the project. We need to make sure, number one, that we're managing expectations. So if they say they want to reduce their badging office lines from, they got 100 people in line and they want to make sure that there's never a line ever again, we need to say to them, okay, well, let's manage those expectations properly, because our system is kind of like a gym membership. A gym membership doesn't make you healthy and fit. It has the capability of doing that if you use it, but we need to make sure that we understand exactly what the criteria for success, what our goals are, in order to make sure that we meet those.
And I think that the other two questions that we have are there processes that exist manually that should not be part of an IDMS automation. We're going to talk about that in the next part of the conversation when we talk about kind of project management. And then the other is what would you say is the minimum viable product for an airport looking to get out of the gate with an IDMS implementation? So both of those we're going to talk about in a second. Now I'm going to be 100% transparent here with everybody listening, is that we have bullet points that are on a Word document to keep ourselves in line. So usually we would try to push the Q&A to the very end. So we're kind of going back and forth here. Let's talk about something here that I think for us is really important, which is something that oftentimes the airports don't realize, which is the data conversion. When you're putting this whole thing together to go ahead and start moving forward in your RFP, in your expectation of the software, the data conversion, talk to us about that, because to me, that's one of the big red flags that people have to know about right up front when they're working on the RFP.
Yeah, data conversion is, we've got a division that's just data. Eric Dodson runs that up, and it is a difficult job to come in and make sure that we're getting all the data conversion stuff right. And he does a fantastic job with that. We need to figure out where all the data exists, where the body's buried, because there are, right now, you've got data that you're going to pull from PACS, the PACS system, physical access control system, the DAC, Telos or the TSC, their computer-based training system, maybe their finance system, their HR system, Excel spreadsheets. There's all sorts of stuff, and it all contains, we talked earlier about the different systems that you're entering data into. Well, we need to basically create one single source, one central data repository for all that data, and we need to make sure that all of that matches up. So there are going to have been data entry mistakes, and reconciling those different sources and making sure that everything is good is important. But one of the big processes, one of the most important things is documenting that process, documenting the data map and the data migration strategy, and making sure that it's repeatable, and repeating it a bunch of times, and doing data validation on it every time, creating exception reports every time, so that we can go back to the source data and make sure that that stuff's cleaned up, because we don't want to carry, they always say garbage in, garbage out. We want to make sure that we're not carrying garbage forward. We want to make this a clean breaking point where your data is now good, and you're not having to worry about doing reconciliations with your DAC. You're not having to worry about whether or not training information is right in the database. We want to have everything correct. Finance is critical to these airports, especially now.
This is something when the question is asked, are there processes that exist manually that should not be part of an IDMS automation? I think sometimes what happens is that we wrote an RFP, you do what's in the RFP. Like, you have to have a back and forth of, do you still need that? Do you still need that? Do you need this? Do you want to do this type of report? That when you start trying to take an RFP and force it on the team that's deploying, sometimes I think you lose some of that interaction of, you don't know what you don't know if you haven't done identity management, if that makes sense. So once you get in there, you've purchased a system. It doesn't matter if it's Intellisoft or Alert or HID or GCR, whatever it is. You've got this system, you've brought it in. Now it's time to go back and forth and look at those processes. We had an airport that had a whole process for who could deliver one type of piece of paper back behind to a certain place, and it was put in place 10 years previous by a badging manager that got mad because people would gather around that area and talk because it was near the coffee machine. They tried to take that process and push it into the identity management system. And we said, no, that's not why we're here. We're here to bring you, future forward, not pull the past into your new future software.
Right.
Let's do a real evaluation of where we're at. Let's hit the reset button. What do how much are you growing? Are you growing 2% a year, 5%, 10%? These are the types of things that you have to look at to understand where you need to go. The software doesn't have to do everything. It just has to do what it's designed to do really, really well. And then you adapt around that and be willing to give up on processes that work for you without the software, because you might not need them anymore. People like to hold on to those processes. No, it has to do this.
I think Joe DeGrassi last week or 2 weeks ago on your call was talking about how he saw a process that had been documented in that it was a procedure that was important and critical to them that they thought was a regulatory compliance issue. And it turns out it was just something that was written by one of the stakeholders there 20 years earlier, and it was now outdated. We see this type of stuff all the time. We've seen, a process where there's a paper process that requires somebody to validate a paper application. That looks good. Yep, no data entry, problems on that. And it has to go through multiple steps of approval with paper. And they tried to say, okay, we want this to be part of our IDMS. And that's not how it works. I mean, a lot of those data entry things that they were doing with paper was making sure that there weren't blank fields, or making sure that, the alien registration number was formatted properly, or that the SSN had 9 digits and not 7. So those types of things, there are a lot of manual processes that exist now that can be completely eliminated by this, and trying to carry those forward with the technology is not good.
We have a question. How do you help stakeholders get past the possibility of having to change current policies and procedures to avoid customization? I'm going to answer, at least for myself.
Yeah.
And then I think you have to have, when we do these, you almost have to, if you try to do it in a bubble where you're trying to write the RFP around, the possibilities of 4 different softwares, then either all the software companies are going to have to customize to what you're asking them to do, or you're going to create a Frankenspec.
Yeah.
And your default has to almost be no. Now let's look at why you're asking that. Let's look at okay, can it be reflected in the software with the configuration as the software is? If it can't, are there processes that need to be changed and workflows that need to be done? It's just a back and forth. It's an educational thing that they have to know that you're saying. When we have a client, we say, we're saying no because we don't want to have these things, because we're about to get into the project management side. But it's a big challenge, having to change those current policies. And it's just education, having the conversation, getting them excited, they get a new way of doing business.
Absolutely. I mean, the most important thing is, we said earlier that the SDs are all the same. The regulations are all the same. But what is in the individual airport's ASP that says, here's how we're going to take that and do it, that's something that they have to do. Airports have to abide by their own ASP. And so there's a distinct possibility. What we want to do when we do a kickoff is sit down with them and find out what is in their ASP having to do with IDs, because they may have to amend that ASP in order to, make and get approval from their FSD in order to move forward with using the system and not using their old procedures that they may have documented. A lot of these things are written in a pretty vague way, though, at airports. And if they're not, that's something we can help with too.
Something that you always say to me when we talk about deployments is you've had the RFP processes. It's time to deploy. We've, the consultant or the integrator or whoever it is, they talk to them. You've created this RFP, so we've cleaned up a lot of the things that we've talked about that are the challenges, and not doing the 500-page one, looking at how you're going to use it in the future instead of trying to pull what you've done in the past in there and force people into these customizations, having a real back and forth when it comes to the evaluation committee, making sure that, and this is something that we didn't get to, but making sure that, don't allow the manufacturer to cherry pick some, we're just going to list 3. We've got 10, 7 of them are bad, but these are the 3 that we're going to do. Call everybody. If somebody has a bad deployment, sometimes, and we're going to talk about failures, sometimes how they recover from the failure and how the project progresses after the failure, just because, there was a failure doesn't mean everything is ruined. If you come back and you do it differently, but you always tell me, before you can define success, you have to define failure in these projects. And that comes back to customization. Like, how do you define failure?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of different types of failure. You've got, the worst type is just failure to launch completely, failure to ever go live. That's the worst. But, there is a fantastic report from the Standish Group called the Chaos Report, and it talks about project failure, and it categorizes it in a couple different ways. And one of it is, okay, this is just complete failure to launch. The other one is it's a challenged project, which means it's either way over budget or really, really late, or maybe even both. And so, those things can be considered failures to a degree as well. We want to make sure that the project is on time, it's on budget, and we go live and have a great experience. That's really, a quick version of success. Without those things, though, if you don't have that, if you have situations where people are way late, or if the project is way late or way over budget, that's a failure too. Mm-hmm. And that is a lot more likely to happen, significantly more likely to happen. On an industry level, it's well above 50% of custom software projects are failures from that perspective, where they're either they never launch at all, or they're late and over budget. Well over, close to 75% of projects are considered failures in that realm. But it goes back to customization. If your specification has 150 things in it that have never been done before, it's a lot more likely to fail than if you say, hey, what's actually out there that's currently available? And this is something that's hard from an industry perspective, for people who've never been involved in one of these projects at an airport. They need to get help. They need to hire a good consulting company that can help them, know what's available in the marketplace and what's a reasonable RFP to issue.
Well, there's a lot of moving pieces. We have a project right now. It's been delayed. They have an old access control system, and the access control provider refused to build a connector. So it got pushed a year and a half, because we could never get the access control provider to allow a connector. The access control provider was extremely old. They were losing a lot of clients. And so they recognized, if this identity management system turns on, we're no longer important. Yeah. Because they're going to look at one of these newer systems that connect to a Genetec or a Milestone or a Saab or what. They saw the writing on the wall. So the only thing, instead of working and doing things, they just refused. So people look at it and they go, oh, well, you guys are a year and a half, 2 years past schedule. What's wrong, Convergint? Well, couldn't get the manufacturer to actually build the connector, and we don't want to have a system that's a standalone non-live system that's just for badging and requires dual entry. And so, those are the types of things that when you're putting together the RFP process and you're putting together the project management side, you got to talk to everybody. You got to talk to the client, but you have to have a familiarity with what the manufacturers, all of the manufacturers, are going to have to do. And we have a project together where they had a gas management system that you guys had not connected to before. And instead of saying, oh, sure, we'll write this customization, we had to figure out another way to do it. But they're going to be much happier down the road that every time you do an update, it's not getting delayed because there are random customizations out there.
Right.
So let's switch gears a little bit here. The other side of this is claiming something is compliance when it's not. And we touched on this a minute ago, that, airports, I think we all do. I know I have personally as an integrator, that, we confuse processes for compliance and then try to pull that into the software. And the reason I think, folks, that we're harping on this is because we see this a lot. It's not, we're coming back when we talk about failure things, we're coming back to the same things over and over and over that we've seen, whether it's Dave and just Intellisoft or Convergint doing multiple companies, we see these things. There's a tendency to reflect the badging process as it is today into the software, and instead of taking a real hard look at the kind of cliche reset button. When you're looking at this to determine what the airport wants their new processes to look like, do you do it before? Do you do it after the vendor is selected? you know, is there processes versus compliance? Where do you see this from in terms of a successful deployment?
I'm not sure that I understand the question, Matt. I
Well, it all comes back to processes versus compliance.
Yeah.
And
so
there's, like I said, there's that tendency to try to reflect the badging process into as it is today into the software.
Sure.
So during the evaluation process, I mean, is it difficult to tell whether that process needs to be there?
Well, it's difficult to tell. I mean, it's hard during the evaluation process for an airport to tell whether or not a proposal is accurate in any way. It's made worse by the fact if you have a kitchen sink type of RFP with 1,000 requirements. Most of the time when we're doing demonstrations on these systems, they last maybe 2 or 3 hours. And I'm not sure how an airport can evaluate whether or not all of the, everything in that proposal is accurate based on a 2 or 3 hour evaluation. It's something we struggle with. When we get in an RFP, we will immediately, it goes to engineering, it goes to Don Hudson, and he's going to look through that and tell me, okay, we don't comply with these 15 things, and here's what we need to, think about as far as what it would look like for us to do that, how it's going to impact our other clients. I look at that list of 15 things that he says we don't comply with, and I said, yeah, but we comply with like 5 of those things off the shelf. And he's like, yeah, but that's by the letter of what's in there. They're probably things that we're not really doing. So we need to understand whether or not we're, and sometimes that's kind of a fortune teller type mentality. Do we know what the client really wants? Because they're saying this in writing, but the way that it's grouped or whatever, we think that they really want it to do something even more than what it's saying. So out of everything having to do with identity management, when it comes to if you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport, it applies to visitor management. We've seen that in a specification recently where it's asking for us to do certain things. We know that we can do those things off the shelf, but it's not really what they want. And we know that it's going to be different there because there doesn't seem to be a perfect one-size-fits-all solution for visitor management yet. And we're working on it. We're working on lots of stuff, but the problem is we got to get the airports to agree. And the airports all want to have a little bit different processes when it comes to visitor stuff. So
what can this is something, let's skip forward to something that we were talking about yesterday, that what can an airport do to make the project more likely to succeed? Because I think on our side, a lot of times what happens is we're going to ask a lot of RFIs, we're going to try to get a lot of clarifications. We want to make sure that we're not saying yes to everything, that we're saying, yes, but, or no, and, or, these types of things. But what can an airport do on their side to make, because they kind of expect us to show up ready to go, ready to make it a success. We're paying you guys money and you're going to get this thing turned on and you're going to get it going. What can an airport do on their side to make a project more likely to succeed?
Keep it simple, define their list of key core functionality and make sure that they're not marking things that are mandatory that maybe aren't. For instance, that integration with gas pumps or with vending machines, things of that nature that are kind of a stretch. They're a wish list. Let's eliminate those things or at least make them optional. I think that would be a really good start. And then being engaged in the process. We've got our project process. Anybody who's a stakeholder needs to be involved in the kickoff meeting, and then we've got workshops thereafter to make sure that all the different stakeholders in the project whether it's people in the ID office, people in operations, people in regulatory compliance, their ASC. We want to make sure that all of them have a shot to see what we're actually doing and make sure that it's going to meet their needs. Because as we define those goals, we need to get feedback from them as we move along. Is this what you're looking? Is this good? Is this going to make you succeed? That's the kind of thing that I think is really essential in the go live process. Is that what you were talking about? Or are you talking about?
Yeah, I think a lot of times,
points, but we've gone off book a long time ago.
Yeah, I tell you what, I think a lot of times we see things that they say are mandatory, must have, that we find out when we get into the project. It's a nice
that they're not. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you respond to the RFP this way, but when you get into the room, and I understand from the client standpoint, we're putting out an RFP, we have to have something to make sure that you can do this stuff. We got to have a list of some sort. We can't just say, hey, how would you like to do this? We have to have some things that you need to be able to do. But, so I completely understand that. But I think, we have to make sure that if you say mandatory, that it's actually mandatory, because a lot of decisions are being made on our side as the respondents to the RFP, that we're making when you say mandatory, there's a lot going into it. Then when you say it's nice to have and you change it after, when we're in the meeting, kind of messes up the project a little bit, because we've developed an entire project plan based off of what you wrote into an RFP.
Right.
And when you get into the room, the resources may change, everything may change. So I think, partnering with a good consultant who's done these projects in the past, making sure that their airports that had them as a consultant were happy with them, and that, that they say, they address my needs with the RFP that they wrote.
Absolutely.
Those are the types of things that airports on their side can kind of do to make it more likely to succeed.
Absolutely.
Now let's talk about I think 5-6 years ago, the conversation that we're having would have been interesting, but now these systems are deployed, so they're out there now. And why a lot of times one of the things that we look at is the usage and support. Why are those types of things so difficult? So, I know we have a number of airports on here that they've gone through the RFP process, they've done the project, they've learned the lessons that we're talking about, and they've lived through go live. Now they're running their badging office day to day, utilizing the identity management system, right?
Right.
So, why do these systems seem to be so often a target of irritation for the airport, instead of something that they're, ranting and raving about how great it is at the conferences that we go to?
Yeah. Well, sometimes they do rant and rave about how great it is. But I was at a conference a couple years ago, and I'm not going to name names, but a director of security got up in the conference, and there are 100 people there, and said our identity management system is awful. And she didn't mention it by name, but she said over the past 3 years we've put in 129 patches, and every time we fix one thing, we break 3 other things, and it's just been a nightmare for us. And so that goes back to having custom one-offs. I think everybody in this industry now, we've been doing it for a while. I think everybody is on board with the identity management companies are all on board with, okay, the custom stuff's over. We're not doing that anymore. So that's part of it. I think the other part is having a phenomenal or good support staff. A lot of times support staffs don't truly understand airport operations. They're technical people. And the software functionality is different at every airport, and because of the configurations changes, and it may not be documented well. And I got to be honest with you, that's something that we've struggled with to a degree, and we've had to put systems in place and policies in place and training in place to make sure that everything is documented. When a support rep gets a call from an airport, they know exactly what that airport is doing, and they're able to easily handle that call. But supporting custom one-off projects is really difficult.
Sometimes people ask us, as the integrator, is Convergint, like, well, what role do you play? Like, why are you here? And beyond the hardware, you don't want to be purchasing hardware and doing those types of things. The other side of it is that, typically a lot of times when you have software, the team that deploys it is not the team that's servicing it a lot of times.
Yeah.
And so for us, when we have a specialist that's there for the hardware deployment, there for the peripheral deployment, there for the go live, and then after you go live, when there's a problem, you've got somebody locally, earlier you said having that local presence, you've got somebody locally that was there through the whole project, that saw the whole thing, and they're there. So when something goes wrong, they can show up and go, okay, it's not the signature pad, it's not this, it's not the hardware pieces.
Yeah.
Here's where it is, and communicate that over to you to say, hey guys, we've checked all this stuff.
Yeah.
We think it's this. And that support, that the support resources, it's just critical. And then you talk about being able to upgrade products without breaking existing functionality. So when you do push out an update or an upgrade, you're not breaking the whole thing overnight at 3 a.m. and the airport shows up and nothing works, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely critical. And Convergint plays a critical role, or the integrators that in general play a critical role for us, because there are a lot of things that you guys do to help support systems and make sure that we're doing the best that we can. We don't have a single on-site resource for any of our clients, not a single one. Having someone there is really important. Obviously, you guys are doing the installs and stuff like that, but you guys are a critical part of the support structure. We've got some guys down in New Orleans that are just amazing at helping us service that airport. It's basically almost like having additional Intellisoft employees. And same thing up in DC. We've got some great guys in DC. We don't have a single employee who lives in DC, but I got probably 20 guys from different, integration companies like yours that help us support stuff. So having someone in the mix that's there on site in the front lines that can help support our products is really important.
Now we're slowly running out of time. And I know everybody's probably very upset about it. Because it's a good conversation. I feel like we should just do our own thing separate from all of this, so people can just log in anytime they want and watch you.
We'll just do daily calls.
We'll do our own mission brief every day. Here's what we're seeing. 2 questions. First off, what can an airport do to help you? Because you create the software, but one of the questions that I often get is well, what can we do as an airport to help? And then we'll talk about keeping the system relevant, because that's something I definitely want to ask you. And Mike Cartier from our team asked me to ask you. But what can an airport do to help you?
So just make sure that their people are engaged. Make sure that they are.
I mean, when they come up with an idea, should they tell you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, from a product development standpoint, our clients are our best research and development team. We're, obviously we're engaged with, ACINA, AAAE, ACC, but airports, we get better ideas from airports than we do from anybody else. So if they've got an idea, let us know. We regularly add things to our list, those specs that come out with wish list items. Sometimes we won't even bid a project, but we'll see something in one of those specs that we're like, oh, that's a great idea. And so we'll incorporate that. And we have a system that tracks all of our product enhancement requests. And It's in a system where we regularly discuss and review what the impact is going to be. We talk to our other clients. Is this something you'd be interested in? So engaging, if they've got an idea for how to make identity management better at airports, we're all ears. We love those ideas because we're not on the front lines. We don't see this stuff every day. And if there's something about our product that isn't good, we want to know about it. Or if there's something that can make our product significantly better, we want to know about that so that we can work on improving it for not just that one client, but for all of our clients, because once it's in the product, it's in the product.
So last question, in terms of COVID-19.
Yeah.
So, where do you see identity management in relation to COVID-19?
Well, I think that with social distancing and the things that are going on, there's going to be a lot more automation. We're going to talk, obviously paper is gone. I think that there are devices and things that, where there's physical contact with stuff, where we need to make sure that we're limiting the amount of physical contact, the amount of face-to-face. And so we're looking at a lot more automation in the future. We want to minimize any type of physical interaction right now. And right now I was on the call yesterday with the TSA. I was on the AAAE call. We're definitely paying attention to all the different alternative measures that are out there and trying to help with that. And there are problems that our clients are coming to us with that the TSA hadn't even considered yet. And so those types of interactions and making sure that we're communicating with each other during this time if we see a problem coming down the road, it may not be right now, but something that's coming down the road, we need to jump out in front of that. A lot of people are using these alternative measures to extend their badge expiration dates so that they don't have to have people coming into their ID office. The problem is we're just kind of kicking that problem down the road because now you've got not 30 days worth of renewals that you have to do this month and not just 60 days, but you have like almost, 90 days worth of renewals that have to happen, and they have to happen on June 1st. And that's not good because we're a month away from having, a lot more traffic in ID offices than we've had historically. And there may not be as many people in those ID offices. They may not have the enough equipment and people to get all that stuff done. So right now we're trying to be as proactive as we can with new ideas and software development, but it's really important that we're engaging with all of our airports and making sure we understand what the problems that they're having right now, and engaging with them to come up with solutions to those problems. And anything we can do to make this situation better. It's not good. It's a terrible situation. Anything we can do to make it better, that's what we're trying to do.
So do a real quick recap here because we had this thing logged in for an hour. I should have reserved 3.
Time flies.
Time flies. So, we talked about why the need. We talked about, the RFPs and purchasing process. We talked about project management and interacting and, really communicating. And then we talked about usage and support. How do you keep these systems going? I think the main thing is if you're not in an active RFP process, you can call Dave Peeples or Matt Powell anytime if we're not responding to the RFP that you got out there, and have these conversations and pull your consultant in and pull everybody, talk to the other manufacturers, talk to the other integrators, communicate, have conversations, and just get a fuller picture. I think the days of calling up the consultant and saying, write me an identity management RFP are over. We've seen the systems out in the wild for a long time, and now we know some of the challenges. And so knowing those challenges, now we can, as an industry, move in a direction to where it's addressing what, we're scratching the actual itch. We're not doing all the other stuff that's out there. And then if the industry wants to see certain functionalities, then it communicates it and we start to develop a path as an industry towards those functionalities. Does that make sense? So that, you know, everybody is on the same page. We're not creating customizations and we're moving in a direction that's what's best for the airports. So that's it, man. I guess we'll probably, somebody said we need to do a part 2. So I guess we probably will.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do a party line like back in the day where everybody can just like, it's like my grandmother's old house where
right.
She had the party line and you could just tap over and listen to the neighbors. Like maybe we'll just do a little one of those prayer line things, me and you and people call in.
I'm doing that all the time. I've got poker on Mondays with a group of friends, other team members and clients that we're doing on Mondays. On Tuesdays, I've got a group called ISC Worst where we do basically a little virtual cocktail hour. Let's set something up for Wednesday or Thursday. Let's do it. We can have everybody's faces on the screen, like Brady Bunch.
All right, good deal. Well, thanks, Dave. Thanks, Micah. You guys don't see Micah, but he's back there making sure this thing actually stays live and try to keep us on track. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I've got another great partner coming up in not next week, but the week after. So keep an eye on the LinkedIn. If you're listening in and you didn't see the slide, then make sure you check the video so you can see Dave's T. Steiner.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
All right, buddy. I'll call you later. I'll talk to you later.
All right. See ya.
All right, thanks.